Okay, so I really love Lovable. I mean, they are the clear leader in their lane and just that entry point for consumers to just go out and build things. Look, Lovable is a really strong one. I think it's going to outperform the NASDAQ average. First off, I got to say, I love the branding. Love. Just the colors and how it all comes together. And you scroll on their site and they've got a white background, but it's just chef's kiss. Love the branding. Look, I used this product going back in December, so it was an early user, I guess, for it. I gotta say, it's gotten much better since. What I can tell about that is that team is moving with speed. They're pushing new features, but just the experience overall with it has gotten a lot better over the past several months. That's a really good indicator here. They've got a lot more to go in order to really drive that valuation up and build into where they're going. But the team's got a lot of credibility. They only have 45 people or 40 to 45 people as far as I can tell. So that's a small team and they are moving fast. And it's not just the velocity on the product. They hit $100 million annual recurring revenue run rate faster than pretty much everyone. So they're sitting there right now having raised a $200 million round at a $1.8 billion valuation recently. So the market is starting to wake up to what potential there is here with Lovable, but the people have already spoken and they actually spoke pretty early on. Now they're sitting with over 2 million users, and I think roughly about 10% of them are paying subscribers for the service. Probably expect that to go up just over time. Maybe they can get that percentage up, convert more people to paying, but even at that ratio, pretty good. And you kind of have to think about that $2.4 million, 2.4 million total users as like that acquisition funnel and getting out there and building that brand, especially in a consumer or prosumer space where they're really trying to play, having that kind of big profile and that huge top of the funnel. Super helpful. Okay, that's really good stuff. It reminds me a lot of what Shopify did early on. And I think there are some parallels actually with Shopify and Lovable. But Shopify, even though they had very high churn initially, they were able to kind of craft this really good story at a high level of getting a lot of people, a lot of eyeballs on that product, a lot of discussion amongst people that were interested in Shopify's case in selling products online. In Lovable's case, there's a lot of discussion, whether that's on Reddit or in forums or otherwise, or amongst friends. Hey, what'd you build that with? I didn't think about you as somebody that like could build an app or build something yourself. How'd you do that? Where'd you do that? I think Lovable's got all of that kind of good stuff coming in with it. They've also they're based in Stockholm. And I think backed by some of the folks that did Klarna. Spotify's obviously there as well. There's like an ecosystem, and that can be really powerful, right? They're not quite, right within the Silicon Valley, San Francisco ecosystem, but they do have their own. And I think there are a lot of people backing that kind of European tech cheerleading, whether cheerleading from the sidelines or actually rolling up their sleeves and really trying to help this company along. So cool to see that they've kind of got a big ecosystem, even for a small company. And clearly they've been able to get some awesome talent in, as I can see by how fast that product's moving and really making some improvements on. Look, if you dig into the product a little bit and use it, I think there are some elements too that you kind of have with ChatGPT. It's almost like a slot machine psychology. Sometimes with ChatGPT, you put something out there, you're not exactly sure what you're going to get back, especially if you try to make an image, let's say, or you use Google Veo 3, let's say, to make a movie. You put in a prompt, you wait a little bit of time, you're not sure what's going to come back. Maybe it's something awesome, like, whoa, I can't believe it. I just love what I saw. Maybe it's something that's like, this is kind of meh. And like, I got to try again, and that's kind of annoying. There's a little bit of that sort of psychology going on with Lovable. You don't quite know what the payoff is going to be on each prompt, but it can actually be, somewhat addictive. But there's a positive expected value. You know that if you spend the time, you craft it, you tell it what you want it to do, you're going to get there and you can kind of plow through. And for the group of people that never really thought that they could program something or build an app, or that was something you had to find a developer to do, oh, wow, this has like opened up a huge new world. So sometimes what you get back, I mean, that's like a wow-wee. Sometimes it's meh, but you got the basics there, and I think there's some underrated psychology at play just within that product. Pretty cool. Look, there's a virality to this all as well. This is one of the few tech products that my non-tech friends know about and talk about more actively. That's saying something. And that crossover appeal to kind of something that feels a little bit more mainstream within that consumer space, lots of value there. And it's very difficult to kind of overcome that if you're a competitor or trying to move into that space. Once somebody has kind of established some mind share around it, that's a harder slog. You know, these aren't necessarily enterprise buyers that are really looking at, you know, every feature and otherwise. It's more of that feel, it's more of that essence for it. And Lovable's planted their flag first there. And I think this is where the brand comes in and plays. They were the first to really kind of establish and say, like, let's claim this territory. I think they were called GPT Engineer before, which seems like it's in totally a different lane here, right? I mean, GPT Engineer sounds like a highly technical company. Lovable sounds like they have found this smart positioning of consumer entry point. Let's make it as easy as possible to kind of get into it. And I think that that's really the smart positioning to move here in the market. So I think there's a next level upside here. It really does seem like there's a pretty straight path from going from 100 million of annual recurring revenue to growing within that group, getting, you know, subscribers to pay more each month. I think that's very doable as they start to take on more. The product evolves, they can handle things more and more end to end. People start to put these systems maybe into production in some circumstances or otherwise, and they can ramp and scale with those early users. Kind of the same path that Shopify had, right? Start in ways that feel very far from enterprise, but then start to kind of build up towards that. And you have a very nice kind of strategy and playbook to get there. So I think that's a relatively straight path for them to get to that 1 billion in revenue mark. And there's just a huge market for this. The number of people that feel like they could tell a computer what they wanted to see, or even talk to it without even typing, and then get something back that's cool, that could be, you know, as simple as just like a website for their business or their store or their cafe or anything like that. It just was easy to do, but then also has kind of some of the more advanced features like databases and otherwise that they could kind of tack on and take their business to the next level. I think there's a lot of growth kind of both with new customers, but then just expanding your relationship with existing ones. Really cool to see that. And look, maybe if you squint really hard enough, you could see the outline of like an app store type platform from Lovable to help everyone get their new products that they've just built on Lovable found, right? If it becomes super easy to build, and everyone's got their ideas and you've got tons of creativity going to this platform, what's the next problem? Well, how do people monetize that? How do they get their loving, you know, new creation that they've just made discovered? How do they distribute that? Maybe that's something you squint hard enough, you could kind of see, is there like an app store play for Lovable? I think that could, you know, come down the line and just tack on some more great stuff onto the valuation. But you know, where they are today, I think they've got a straight shot towards something great, even without having to squint towards that. So look, there's always going to be naysayers, people that take the other side and kind of just talk shit about this sort of stuff. Look, I'm gonna go through. I've thought about this stuff. I know where the kind of risks sit and whatnot. Let's go through this and really like make sense of it, because I think this one's, you know, I'm super bullish on Lovable, and I'm not going to be dissuaded by this kind of stuff. So look, model risks. Okay, this big one. I've heard a lot of people talking about this of like, oh, OpenAI or Anthropic will just compete and cut them off. Look, Lovable, as far as I can tell, I don't think they're actually using the latest state of the art models, and it works very well, right? And what that kind of tells you is that you actually don't need to be state of the art in the models. It's how you're orchestrating it, how you're putting everything together for it. That's kind of the secret sauce. That's like where the mode is. That's where some of the smart engineers at Lovable are probably focused. And that's fantastic because it means it gives them a lot more flexibility. Lovable is more like the router. It sees like, oh, okay, this person wants to try to do this. Well, let's send it to this model with these sorts of prompts and this sort of context, and it'll achieve that really well. That's routing, that's orchestration. And eventually, I think Lovable can probably build out their own models as they need to for certain parts. Maybe that's already something that they're working on. I think there isn't a underlying risk here from Anthropic and OpenAI. I think Lovable can carve out their own space with it and just really focus well on this. So I think the other aspect is like, people always look at other startups. I, I think they already own this lane, right? The brand has won, it's over, right? And partly you got to look at just like what are the screen colors here, right? So Replit and Bolt, I think you'd kind of consider those to be like the closest competitors. They all have dark screens and dark backgrounds. I'm just going to say that means that they're not actually competing with Lovable. Lovable has a nice, clean aesthetic, a white background. Replit and Bolt make you think that, it's 3 in the morning and like your eyes are squinting because you can't see because everything's just like dark mode. That is a fundamentally different person that they're going after. And I think Replit and Bolt, or maybe it's more of a hacker ethos, maybe it's more somebody who already sees themselves kind of as a quasi engineer, product manager, otherwise with it. Uh, the aesthetics tell you they've thought about these brands. Hopefully, hopefully they didn't just pass it off to somebody else to come up with like some icons and stuff like that. But assuming they put in some thought and love to it, they chose a very different lane. And I think Lovable can own the space that they're really in. I don't really worry about the other startups. I think Lovable's already won this area, right? The other one that I've seen and played with that's super new. I don't think they've raised any funding, so already they're at kind of a massive disadvantage in terms of distribution and funding. Is a company called Mocha. I've tried it out. I've played with it a little bit, although I've used Lovable a lot more. Look, it's not noticeably better enough yet. If I had to really explain it, I'd be kind of stuck trying to figure out what is it that's better about this? Like what could be different? And I don't think that they might be doing anything other than maybe attracting a set of users that were most likely to churn anyway. The sorts of people that like hang out on product hunt looking to try something just for the novelty of it and it's new and otherwise, and they'll jump back or go somewhere else anyway. Real tourists in the kind of space, I have a really hard time kind of seeing them really get established with it. Now they do have a white background though on their site. So if there was a startup that could slow down Lovable, I think this might be the one. But I don't think so. I'm not losing sleep over it. Look, the bigger player here is Canva. Okay, why Canva? Why am I thinking about Canva? It's because Canva also does very well with the informal consumer, prosumer crowd. It's another company that I have heard from, let's say, non-technical people outside of tech that they use, right? And Canva is objectively huge, whether that's for like, posters that they're making or for somebody's band or just anything on the personal front, or just like they're in, they need to make a marketing flyer for their company and they don't really think about themselves so much in marketing or otherwise, but it's just like an easy tool for it. Okay. That sounds like it could be a lot more of the person that Lovable is trying to go after for other stuff. So it hasn't really been I it hasn't really been clear enough to me that this is truly a threat. I think as well too, I give a lot of credit to the team at Lovable. I think that if this team can kind of create the growth that they've had, and it's not their first rodeo, like I said, they had GPT Engineer, they have been working around this stuff. There's some grit, there's some determination. They've got some fantastic investors that they've been able to get on board here. I am confident that they can navigate against Canva. Canva's got some other things going on, right? They're going up against Figma, they're going up against Adobe. They're still a private company. Are they going to IPO? They got stuff happening. So I don't know that it's so easy for them to just like flip a switch and roll out this like Lovable killer. I think I've got enough confidence the team at Lovable, they can navigate that, they can make all that happen. Look, next thing is retention. Always a big thing. Look, we got to just say this. This product has not been out long enough for us to really even know how good their retention is. I think some of the early indications are that it is very strong, right? Looking at how long people are staying with Lovable, let's say they start in 1 month, are they still using it 4 or 5 months later? Apparently, those numbers are looking good, but they haven't been around for 12 months, so you don't know the 1 year retention. You're not entirely sure of how that story is going to play out. But I look at the Shopify analogy and look, they had weak retention. They had a lot of people coming into that product, and sometimes people didn't retain with Shopify because they went out of business. Okay. But they still created an amazing brand, an amazing company at Shopify, and they won despite it. And that could just be the nature of the category, right? That wasn't the case for Shopify. It wasn't really a reflection on Shopify, the low retention, but the fact that they were able to kind of build out that category and win that category. I think that was, something where their weak retention was more a function of the category and not specifically Shopify. That could be the case here with Lovable, but again, I think that they will be able to overcome that. Um, and I think a strong brand, that leader position, that's a massive advantage in customer acquisition cost or CAC over their competitors. And that was a big aspect for Shopify as well. If you're in a market that maybe has some of these retention issues, if you can acquire way better than everybody else, you're going to win in that market. And Lovable has demonstrated one thing very clearly, which is it has a virality to the product. They've been able to acquire very, very well and grow that user base among consumers very, very well. This kind of prosumer consumer segment, and that's really fantastic to see. And I think they can grow that into kind of this enterprise story as well, just like Shopify was able to do here. So, look, I think the concerns are really outweighed by the positives here. You can always try to pick things apart to some degree, but overall, I am super bullish on Lovable. I think it's going to outperform the Nasdaq average here. And look, if you agree, you disagree, look, you can comment below. Let us know what you think, and of course, subscribe to get more analysis on private tech companies.